Hey there, here I have Wayne Krantz's book, An Improviser's OS, I guess stands for Operating System. The title of this video is The Craziest Guitar Method Book. Maybe I shouldn't say crazy, but definitely unusual or weird in a good way. He even says himself, what is this bullshit? So I want to take a look at this book. Who is it for? And how do I use it? I always try to find a way to show you how I use these books. I also always have to be careful not to give away too much of the content. It's not the point. So I ordered this book from his Bandcamp. It's fairly inexpensive. It was a little bit pricey to order it from Europe because you have to pay for shipping and some import tax or whatever. But if you're interested, you should obviously always support the author and buy the book. You gotta have a little bit of an open mind for this book. It's definitely not for everybody. And for me, I'm kind of curious when I see stuff like this. I want to know what it is about. So there's quite a lot of talking in this book. It's kind of like written as a conversation between a teacher, I guess Wayne Krantz, and a student. I don't know if it's a real actual conversation that they transcribe or if it's made up. Doesn't matter. It's written as a dialogue or a conversation. And then there's this formula that he came up with. So it's a formula. So he explains how he came up with this, what it is the point of all this. So I always try to avoid talking in my videos and teaching in general. I want to get to the playing. But in this case, I'm going to have to do a little bit of talking because we have to explain kind of how to set this up. So it's not an in-depth look at Wayne Krantz's universe of music or anything like that. I'm going to give you a brief overview to see what this is and how you can use it. So let's get started, shall we? So on page 10, he starts with formulas. 1-note formula to 12 notes formulas. The first formula is just one note. So there can only be one formula with one note. That's the first formula. 2 notes formulas could be any of the intervals we find in the chromatic 12-note scale of Western harmony. So that's the formula. These are our formulas, 2-note formulas within an octave. So if I play like this, that's the same formula. It doesn't matter what octave you're in. It's those 2 notes make up that formula. And 3 notes formulas. So this would be a 3-note formula. I'm starting on C, right? Then this. And this. Until you've exhausted all the different combinations of 3-note formulas. And some of them are going to be the shapes and structures that we recognize, triads, or a minor triad, augmented, and all the rest of it. But a lot of them are going to be 3-note combinations that we normally don't consider in music theory. And then you have 4-note formulas and 5-note formulas. You get the idea. He mentions somewhere how many there are, and I can't find it, but it's quite a lot. So a 5-note formula would be, so I guess the first 5-note formula is this. And then this. And then this. So he lists them, writes them out as scale degrees. So 1, flat 2, flat 3, 5, or whatever. I think it gets more relevant with the 5-note, 6-note, and 7-note, and even the 8-note formulas. Then it gets a little bit, I don't know, not applicable in my opinion. And then it ends with the chromatic scale, which is the last formula, I would assume. Yep. Then there's only one 12-note formula. And then he has this conversation that starts with, what is this bullshit? And it's quite an interesting read, and you should read all this if you're going to work with this book. There's quite a lot of reading involved. because you have to kind of understand what it is we're going to do. So there's a specific method of practice that we're going to get to. Let's get to that right now, actually. On page 66, we find an Improviser's OS operating system, frequently asked questions, part 7. And at this point, you need an instrument, a recording device. I have my loop pedal, and a metronome. He talks about why he thinks it's important to listen to what you just recorded, and because you're going to record yourself practicing these formulas, and make sure that you play in time. That's why you use a metronome, and you listen back to it. Then he has all these arguments for why it's important to do that and why it's useful and helpful to do that. Then he wants you to choose to pick a formula and a key and a zone. So a zone is an area of the fretboard, 4 frets. So this would be a zone. In classical guitar or conventional guitar notation, you would call that 5th position, because your index finger is on the 5th fret. So this is the zone. Then you pick a formula, you pick a zone randomly, and you pick a key randomly. So with the key, he means the root. I think it would have been better to use the word root or pedal note or something rather than key, because it's not really a key if it's just a bunch of random notes, but he calls it a key. So as a demonstration, he picks a formula, a 5-note formula, and again, you're not supposed to go through them in order, you pick them randomly. So here is 1 flat 3, 3, 5 flat 7. Those are 5 notes. Then he picks a key G. So G is going to be the root. And then he picks a zone, 5th fret. So this zone. Then you have to figure out where those notes within that formula falls in this zone. So for the top string, you have a B flat, B, so that's the flat 3 and the 3. And the second string, you have F and G, which is flat 7, 1. And the third string is D, which is the 5th. Fourth string, 1, flat 3. Next string is 5th, flat 7. And the bottom string is also B flat and B. So if I play them in order, you could consider that to be some kind of blues scale, I guess. But he doesn't even want you to think of it like that, I don't think. And he doesn't want you to memorize the shape, because what we're trying to do is to get away from shapes, habits. It's like you're supposed to kind of discover the notes as you're playing for the first time, kind of like that. Then you set a tempo, and then you just start to improvise with these notes. I don't think he sets a time frame, but I guess you should do it for at least 10 minutes or something, because you need to kind of get into it. So I'm just gonna set a metronome here. I like to use a metronome on 2 and 4. So this is like a beat on 2 and 4. And then you just start to improvise. You try to play in time, so I'm gonna feel it like a swing, and then I'm just gonna play. And you can use double stops, right? So this specific formula has, as I said, kind of a bluesy feel to it. So it's not that strange. You can find conventional things that you normally play in this. One thing that you learn from this is if you are not sure of all the notes of the fretboard, as a jazz guitar player, if you want to get to a certain level or a good level, it's absolutely necessary that you know what the notes are that you're playing. And this will force you to really think about that. And you're thinking about the interval, how the note relates to the root. So if you're not super strong with this, I would recommend using a pedal note. And he doesn't say, I don't think you're supposed to record a comp. Maybe he talks about that later, I'm not sure, but he just wants you to play like that. I'm able to hear how these notes relate to the G. If you're not that strong, yeah, maybe it's good to use some kind of pedal. And I've showed before this app that I have, which is called Tanpura Drone. So I'll pick a G, drone, and then maybe I'll do it not a swing. This is like an even beat. And then you listen back to what you just did. So you can use a loop pedal. And I think you will find that it's not as weird as you think. When you're playing it, you're thinking, what the hell is this? Especially the more strange, the scales that are furthest away from the normal scales, as it were. But when you listen back to it, you might notice that it's not that strange. And also, you will notice when your timing is not as good as you think. So you should pay attention to your timing. So the challenge is to resist playing the other notes that you would want to play. You can only play those notes in that zone. And you want to play the notes that belong to that scale, kind of, but no, you can't use that. So you have to be creative within that limitation. So which means that you can't play your normal pet phrases. And that's another, I think, also the main objective of this whole thing is you can't use your standard phrases. You can't play your licks. So that could be the other person that this is good for. Somebody who's kind of sick of his or her licks and want kind of a fresh approach and to practice with a different kind of mindset where you try to be creative without using standard jazz language.
Look for books on improvisation because I want to learn how to do that. I'm tired of what I'm playing. It's the same licks over and over again. I'm bored. The audience is bored. This is the place to come.
Also, finger habits, right? We do a lot of stuff. When we get good at jazz, like we tend to use the same stuff over and over. Even the best players do that to a certain degree, right? But this kind of exercise will force you to not do that. So it's going to be more obvious if you pick like a C major scale. But you remember that formula, that will be one of the formulas. At some point you will find the regular scales. If I try to play the C major scale in fifth position, it's like this, right? So that B is outside of the zone, which means I can play it here or there. But with this, you can't play that note, so you will have to omit it. So if you are used to playing that scale and practiced it a lot, you might be playing that note just out of habit. It can actually be difficult to not play that note. You have to break your finger habits. So now I'll show you a way to use this in a more familiar context. Let's do it over a jazz tune. So let's do it over So What. So I'm gonna record a little loop with So What. If I would jam on this, my hands would fall to two places on the guitar that are more, my Dorian stuff is more, I feel more like at home. Maybe here. So now I'm playing all my stuff, like all my licks and my finger stuff that I've memorized and developed over the years, and that's not all bad. And he even saying that, you know, it's not like you can't do that, but at some point it's not super creative. It's more like I'm just playing stuff. So let's apply this method and see if we can do that. So as I mentioned, here is where all my Dorian, D Dorian stuff is. So if I just shift to maybe here and decide that this is gonna be my, so that would be zone 6, I guess. Those are the notes. If I pick D Dorian as a formula, I'm limited to those notes. No, here. So those are the only notes I can play, right? And I have to stay in the same zone for the next. And now I'm in the usual territory. Some intervals. play here. So I switch from an idea to the next. So the point is that it forces me to play stuff that I've never played before. So there was no Miko standard licks in there. It was just kind of trying to find something with the limits that zone creates. It opens up a different kind of perspective on the fretboard and what you can do with some notes, right? There's a lot more in here. He talks about how you can use this as a way of playing outside. You can pick two formulas, one which is like a conventional tonality, and then another one that is kind of not, and then mix them together. He talks about using different, once you get really comfortable playing in a zone, you can use 2 zones or ultimately all the zones. So there is a lot more than what I'm showing you here. Also, you can take any formula and create a mode. So you, just like you would with a C major scale, starting on another note gives you a mode, and you can do that with any formula. But it's a little bit redundant because those modes will also, you will find them in the list of formulas, if you know what I mean. Oh yeah, there's another thing. When you have a formula with a lot of notes, you can kind of create smaller formulas within that. Just like you would with the C major scale, for example, you can find a C major pentatonic, you can find arpeggios, you can find triads in that scale. So there are ways to work with these many ways to work with these formulas, more than what I just showed you. Again, I'm just giving you a taste of all the stuff that is in this book. So why would you do this? What is the point? One aspect of this is if you are not super strong with all the notes on the fretboard, is a good way to practice that. Because what happens to us guitar players is that we learn shapes. So D Dorian. We learn a shape. So if we're playing So What, right? We play that. And then we just move it. And that's not necessarily bad, but at some point you need to know what you're doing. And it's more important, in my opinion, to be aware of that this is the 3rd of D minor. This is the 9th, root 7, 6, 5. You need to know that stuff. You need to know what the names of the notes are and where they are on the fretboard. You can't just be playing a pattern. That's not really going to work. When the chords are moving fast, you need to know what you're doing. You need to know what the note is and how it relates to that chord. It's also a matter of hearing it, so I know what the minor 3rd sounds like. If I have a dominant chord, I know what the sharp 11 sounds like a flat 5. So when you keep playing these formulas, you will get to know each interval and how it relates to that root. And that's more important than having perfect pitch for a jazz player, I think. Like when I hear sharp 11, my brain goes, that's a sharp 11, and I know where that note is. Rather than hearing, oh, it's a G sharp or something, where somebody with perfect pitch who always recognizes G sharp, no matter in what context. For me, it's more important to recognize, is it a sharp 9, is it a flat 5, a 9, or whatever. So this will actually help you with that. But also, more than anything else, it forces you to play something that is fresh, so not your usual stuff. I was a little bit confused when I was reading this because he keeps talking about patterns. And for me, I thought he meant this. For me, pattern is this. Or something like that. Like... That's a pattern in my world, but I guess it's a sequence. He talks about this, like a... And then pattern 2. Like scale positions. That's what he means by patterns. Yeah, there's this problem. I keep coming back to this in my videos, that we guitar players, we learn to put our fingers there and we don't know what we're doing. So again, this is a very good book for dealing with that problem. There is a lot of stuff that I disagree with here, and that's not a bad thing. Disagreeing with a teacher is good. There's a lot of assumption, I guess, about what creativity is. To him, it seems like creativity means that you have to play something, innovate something new and fresh, and that has not been done before. I don't think that's what creativity is. I think he's confusing a little bit creativity with innovation. It is entirely possible in my world to be creative in a context, in a tradition. And for me, jazz improvisation is a language. And so if I want to learn a language, I have to learn the standard phrases, the idiomatic phrases that everybody uses. So you practice those, when you learn English, you will practice how do you do over and over. And then you learn how to reply to that. Or do you know what time it is? And, it's 4 o'clock. You have to kind of memorize these phrases in school. I had anyway, too. And then you go to America or somewhere where they speak English. And then in the beginning, you're a little bit unsure. But you're like, how's it going? Good. How are you doing? But after a while, it becomes second nature and you can just speak, right? It's the same thing with jazz. It is a language. And so you will have to learn the standard Charlie Parker phrases. And then you learn how to connect them and how to combine them in every combination and all this stuff. Then at some point, when you really know how to do that, you might want to decide, okay, I'm not gonna be a player who sounds like that, but at first you have to learn the idiomatic phrases, in my opinion. When I hear a jazz improviser, I want to hear the cliches. I want to hear the standard phrases, but used in a creative way. But the cliches are not your enemy, in my opinion. And so it's like when I speak a language, I don't use words. I could use words in a way that I've never done before, Binder, hello, fish, fly over a circus. Okay, I've probably never said those words in that order before in my life. That doesn't give any value, It was improvised, yes. I just came up with that, and I've never come up with that before. But does it have any, artistic value? Not really. So I'm exaggerating a little bit, and I'm sure Krantz would agree with me in this case. But having said all that, I do understand the importance of every now and then disregard all your licks and try to play with a completely fresh outlook and try to do something that you've never done before. You have to work on that stuff too. Otherwise, your playing is going to be stale. It's going to be not fresh. We all know those players who play the same stuff all the time, right? And it's not, even though they can be good, it feels, I don't know, it gets repetitive and it's not inspiring to listen to those players. Again, there's a lot of stuff in this conversation, which is probably a made-up conversation. So all the questions you have when you're watching this, you will probably find in there. So that was my little overview over an Improviser's OS by Krantz. I think this is a mandatory book for a jazz guitar student because it's such a different take on it all. So I strongly recommend it, and I'll put a link to where you can get it. And as always, I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I shall see you next time.